It's Friday, April 29th. Let's talk PlayStation. Alright, we only got a few news stories to talk about. So, first up, Driveclub VR was rated by the ESRB. So, what's going on there, right? Obviously, Evolution just closed, so we're not really sure what this means entirely, but at the same time, the ESRB doesn't rate games that don't exist. So, Driveclub VR is probably going to be a real thing. Hopefully, maybe it'll actually come out and get released. Obviously, we have no clue what it's going to turn out into. If Evolution actually wrapped up the entire thing, if Sony passed off development of Driveclub VR to, say, another studio. We all knew that VR was demoed on Driveclub, but we don't know if it was a real thing or not, if it's going to be like a side expansion, a standalone game. Who necessarily knows, but that is a thing. And that's actually a good thing, because Driveclub is, of course, a very good-looking game, so I'm sure in VR it is one of the more compelling experiences, and certainly a more marquee, bigger title for virtual reality. We're looking at a lot of reasons to buy VR, and it's like, well, we want, big, retail AAA games to be, supported on it, so that's a pretty big title. Speaking of pretty big titles, maybe this next one is going to be a big title, we don't know. Sony recently filed a new trademark for a game. We're assuming it's a game. Well, the trademark is the Sentinel. It's called the Sentinel, and it's, of course, classified as video game software, so that means it's probably going to be a video game of some sort, and this always tells us usually what Sony's working on. Multiple times they will file trademarks, and we'll find out what they are just shortly after, because this one was actually filed just recently, April 26th, so, that means we're possibly not too far off from seeing a formal announcement of this thing, or maybe we'll never see it ever again. That's another thing. Usually we see Sony trademarks and they just come and go without so much as a mention from Sony themselves. But we all know Sony does have a lot of those developers working on some games, so this could be like a certain title from a certain developer that we haven't heard about for a long time. Maybe Sony Bend, maybe any other Sony studios. Maybe it's a new, sort of like a second-party funded game, since Sony's doing a lot of those recently. Your guess is as good as mine. Now, this news story is pretty interesting because it involves something you wouldn't necessarily expect to happen, but so basically Uncharted 4, A Thief's End in the UK, a full-blown investigation has been launched in the UK because apparently a lot of copies of the games a lot of copies of the game were actually stolen while in transit. So while the games were being delivered, the games were like full-on stolen, and presumably they would be resold, or something like that, for a higher markup value, which apparently was a real thing with some eBay users and things like that. But apparently a lot of copies of the game have been stolen. Like I said, a full-blown investigation is ongoing. Apparently, from what the headlines are saying, is that the UK government has already, the UK government, or the agency in the UK that's responsible for tax collection, has collected already 10,000, seized 10,000 copies of the game. So I guess a lot of copies of this game have been stolen, which is certainly unusual. You don't see this happen all that often in the games industry, I guess, so to speak. But Sony has actually commented on this, saying now that there's all these copies of the game that have been loose, basically they're kind of warning you, just as a player, if you're online or something, if you're trying to look up Uncharted 4 videos or details or something like that, be very careful with spoilers or something. We all know that's one of the biggest parts of Uncharted, of course, is the story. So Sony's basically saying, yeah, there are copies out there. People are probably playing this game now, and just be careful when you're on the internet. I mean, I guess that speaks volumes about how big Uncharted 4 is turning out to be, because apparently somebody wanted to steal upwards of 10,000 copies of the game. Also, just maybe for a good little side news story that I wasn't even going to include, but I guess Uncharted 4 is Sony's biggest marketing push for a video game ever. So I mean, this is in terms of money, in terms of commitment, in terms of all the different avenues in which they're advertising Uncharted 4, whether it's media or television or online. They're just doing everything to let people know about this game, and understandably so, because Uncharted 4 is kind of a big deal for Sony. I'm just getting really excited for it at this point. I mean, it's coming up soon, real soon. We only got week and a half left, basically, as I'm recording this. We're finally gonna be able to play this game. Oh god. And for our final news story, because again, a whole lot going on. This probably is a shorter episode, but Sony announced some recent sales figures for PlayStation 4 and big surprise, they're doing pretty well still. So basically, the point between March 2015 and April 2016, they've sold 17.7 million PlayStation 4s, which is a pretty absurd amount, and they're currently at 40 million units shipped, I believe. Because it was a earnings call or something, I believe those are units shipped. I'm just letting people know now, because apparently whenever I say units sold, and they're like, oh no, people in the comments go, oh no, it's units shipped. It's like, whatever, dude, they're going to sell the consoles at some point. They're basically sold. It's not like PS4 is automatically going to just die overnight and those systems aren't going to get sold. But yeah, they're pretty much at 40 million now. A lot of systems. Sony's actually saying that demand for PS4 is rising even more, so the rate of sale is increasing even more for PlayStation 4. I'm sure they're pretty happy about that. Even more so because they're possibly doing this, theoretical, mid-cycle refresh, which is, a whole other theoretical idea of where Sony's members will probably go, and I would have to assume they'd probably do well for Sony. I mean, obviously, it seems like a lot of people are, like, kind of iffy about this whole idea, and they're more so iffy about it because it's kind of a completely new thing for the console industry, and it's kind of unheard of. But I feel like it would probably be received pretty well, and so it'll probably keep doing pretty well, and everything will be pretty well, and pretty well, and pretty... But most notably, what was also pretty funny is that Sony announced some figures for PlayStation Network revenue, and a few people, like, immediately noticed, like, in comments and threads and boards and stuff like that, where they're like, Sony has earned more money on PlayStation Network than Nintendo Corporation has as a whole, which is a little polarizing. It seems like this past week it's basically Let's Talk Nintendo. A lot of Nintendo stuff going on because of their next hardware launch is getting pretty serious. A lot of big news stories going up about Nintendo and their business strategies and them being at E3 and all this nonsense. We won't get into it, of course, because this isn't Let's Talk Nintendo, but yeah, more of a Nintendo week. Overall, I mean, 40 million systems, so he's still doing insanely well. Yeah, I mean, I guess going back to the mid-cycle refresh thing, because we're talking about this every single week now, it seems, because we are getting more and more info about this being a real thing, and we're waiting for this actual announcement to happen for this thing. But the one thing I every time I filmed an episode about that mid-cycle refresh, something I kept forgetting to mention, which is like a very valid point, which people are not looking at this. It's like, and I have mentioned this a few times when I'm saying the forward compatibility thing. It's like, oh, well, it's still the same architecture and everything, so you're just increasing horsepower, game compatibility is still completely there and everything. So yeah, like I keep mentioning, there's that forward compatibility, which makes a lot of sense and is very consumer friendly, but even more consumer friendly, and even it goes back to the very first episode of Ryan on Gaming we did, which was about the PlayStation ecosystem and how disjointed it can be. This is a step in the right direction, because if Sony can release new and stronger, more powerful PlayStations, they can finally sort of bring together their entire ecosystem, because let's say from now on, every single new PlayStation that comes out is going to be using the same architecture. Sony can keep full game compatibility, and they'll just make it stronger and stronger. You can have generational leaps now and not have to worry about things like the PlayStation Store, for example. Whatever's on the PlayStation Store right now, now for sure that purchase you make, say in 2016, is going to work for theoretically the next 10 years on whatever new PlayStation comes out. Sony can finally start building a healthy catalog of like those premium PS2 games on the PlayStation Store, and you won't have to worry about the compatibility of those. They'll just always, that purchase would possibly transfer over to any new PlayStation you buy, because it's like, you look at it now, and the PlayStation 3 PlayStation Store is very different from the PS4's PlayStation Store, because there's all these different titles, all this different compatibility, PlayStation Minis, PS1 Classics, PS2 Classics, which are very different from PS2 Classics on PS4. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's just, that goes right back to that first round on gaming. There's all this fragmentation in Sony's ecosystem, and if they were to theoretically do this idea that we're talking about, and this is, again, me assuming that the mid-cycle refresh PS4 is just like a foundation for the long-term future, because it would kind of suck if they did the mid-cycle PS4 and, game compatibility was fine, but then let's say they release a PS5 and it's all over again, completely different, and game compatibility is messed up whatsoever again. This is just me assuming that's what they're doing for the long-term future, but if that is what they're doing, that would be great. Because then what's on the PlayStation Store right now, and what all the titles that start getting added, that will be like set in stone. You're good for as long as Sony wants to, keep that ecosystem fit together properly, so to speak. Anyway, those are some of the news stories I want to talk about with you guys this week. The Round 9 Gaming topic was, why do certain developers like stop making their franchises? For example, Naughty Dog, they stopped making Crash Bandicoot, Jak and Daxter. Now they're saying that Uncharted 4 is probably going to be their last one for a while. You know, why do they make those decisions and all that stuff? Good conversation topic. I implore you to check it out. See, that's like the word I keep using, implore, because I'm really encouraging you. Maybe I should use a different word. But like, really, go watch that video. It's a good conversation. And keep submitting topics by all means, because that was a submitted topic. In the past, like, 30, 40 episodes were submitted topics, which kind of tells you that I'm running out of ideas here, or I'm just not very creative, at least. I need your help with these things, so please keep submitting some good ideas for me to talk about. I'll talk about things. That's what I do. In case you didn't know that. Anyway, there's nothing else I can... God of War Let's Play, you know, that junk. I don't even know why I mentioned it. Everyone knows the Let's Plays come out Monday. It's just always like a good little housekeeping section at the end of the show, so we can talk and get to know each other. Maybe you should tell me what your favorite color is. I'm not going to tell you mine just yet. I don't want to put everything out there. You know so much about me already. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan, but I can thank you all so much for talking with me, and I'll see you guys next Friday.